Let's give it till 11:31. I hope everyone's having a good weekend. And in Mumbai, it's a nice dry day after almost a week. Shaurya, Danish, all of y'all are, I'm sure, are all set and ready to pack your bags and move out soon. All the panelists. Vaccination done, everything sorted.
Yeah, just waiting for the borders to open up now.
I'm sure. We're all waiting for the borders to open up. Okay, so let's get started. It's 11:31. Thank you all for taking the time, and a very warm welcome, and taking the time to join us at the Red Pen's webinar on how to get into top colleges in the US, UK, Canada during the pandemic. We look forward to an engaging and an insightful discussion over the next hour or so. At any time during the webinar, if you do have questions, do type it in the Q&A section. The chat box is disabled, so please use the Q&A section and we will address it. Okay, a quick introduction to myself and the Red Pen. Moving on to the next slide, yes. I'm Sheetal Vora. I head the Undergrad Services along with my co-manager Mehnaz Jafar. And the Red Pen is the Red Pen is a boutique and a bespoke consultancy based in Mumbai, and we have consultants placed all across the globe. We support students with their educational planning, guidance on profile building, college applications through undergrad, postgrad, MBA, masters, day and boarding schools. One thing that sets the Red Pen apart is the fact that we are members of the international prestigious educational affiliations such as the NACAC, IACAC, IECA. This gives us not only direct access to admission officers, but to professional colleagues, and helps us stay abreast with the latest trends and changes in the educational landscape, be it new testing policies, introduction of new programs, new campuses, so on and so forth. As members of these affiliations, we are required to uphold and maintain the ethical and professional boundaries, and we do take this obligation quite seriously. So when we support families and mentor our students, we do consider this and keep this in mind. Okay, without taking any more time, moving on to welcoming our panelists. Thank you all, and a huge welcome to all of you all. Thank you so much for taking the time and sharing all the information that you're about to. I know all of you all have a zillion things to do and pack up, before all of you all are out of the country, I think in a 15 days or so. And firstly, many congratulations to all of you all for having navigated one of the most competitive and challenging application cycles in history. So again, kudos to all of you all, and congratulations from everybody at the undergrad team out here from the Red Pen. And thank you for trusting us in this journey. Just for the audience to know that we have invited students that we've worked in this last cycle to share components that help them distinguish their applications, because universities also witnessed insane volume in the number of applications this past cycle. So our panelists today are going to share with us components that help them distinguish themselves, whether it was through their essays, extracurriculars, interview prep, all of that, along with their takeaways or insights as they just navigated this process. Before I request the panelists to introduce themselves, a sneak peek into the campuses that they're going to be matriculating at. Yes, thank you. Wow. So those were some really pretty campuses, and I'm sure y'all are all itching to be there. Okay, so can I request the panelists to please introduce themselves with their name, the college that you will be attending, your intended major, and the high school and curricula that you just completed. So let's start with Aditya Narayan.
Yeah, hi, my name is Aditya Narayanan. I'll be attending the University of Richmond, and I'm planning to major in psychology and minor in theatre. I attended the Bombay International School in Mumbai, and I completed the IB diploma program.
Okay, thank you, Aditya, and welcome. Ananya, can we have you next?
Hi, I'm Ananya. I'm planning to go to the University of Notre Dame and doing my major in economics and a minor in data science. I just completed high school from Hillspring International School with the IB diploma program.
Fantastic. Thank you, Ananya. Can we have Aryaman next?
Hi, I'm Aryaman. I'm currently attending...
Aryaman, can you just be slightly louder? Can't hear you. Can't hear you, Aryaman. Yeah, not a problem. We can have Danish introduce himself in the meantime.
Yeah. Hi, I'm Danish Khan. I'll be joining New York University Abu Dhabi, and I plan on majoring in physics. I attended high school at Yusufia Junior College, and my curriculum was Maharashtra State Board.
Super. Thank you, Danish. Can we have Karthik next?
Yeah. Hey, good morning. My name is Karthik, and I'm planning on attending the Georgia Institute of Technology, where I'm going to be majoring in computer science and minoring in mathematics. The high school that I went to was the British School in New Delhi, and the curricula was the IB diploma program.
Thank you, Karthik. And I guess it's the middle of the night for you. You're already in New York, right?
Yeah, I mean, at this point, it's early morning. It's like 2 a.m.
So I'm sure
yeah.
you had your caffeine intake.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you. Can we have Meher next?
Hi, everybody. I'm Meher Kalra, and I've admitted to Dartmouth College. I plan on majoring in math. I attended K.R. Mangalam World School, which is a CBSE school.
Awesome. Sana, can we have you next?
Hi, my name is Sana Mehta, and I will be attending Georgetown University's School of Foreign Service. My intended major is International Political Economy, and I went to the American School of Bombay and also completed the IB diploma program.
Awesome. Shaurya, can we have you next?
Yeah, hi everyone. My name is Shaurya. I'll be attending the University of British Columbia in Canada for mechanical engineering. I studied in Woodstock School for my high school and did the American high school curriculum.
Awesome. Aryaman?
Hi, am I audible?
Aryaman?
Am I audible?
Very faint.
Is this better?
Slightly.
Yeah, okay. So just let me know at any point in time if I'm less.
Yeah, your voice is still very, very faint.
Okay, I'll just try and speak louder till
now it's fine. Now it's fine.
Yeah. So hi, my name is Ariman. I'm currently an undergraduate at IIT Bombay, and I had consulted the Red Pen for my admission to the University of Oxford, where I did get accepted. But then, after a lot of discussions with the Red Pen and my professors, I decided to stay back at IIT Bombay. And I had completed my CBSE curriculum in 2020 from the Tonsbridge School in Dehradun.
Awesome. And I'd like to add for everybody that Aryaman was the All India CBSE science topper in 2020 and the all-state Uttarakhand topper in the IIT Advanced, right, Aryaman?
Yes, thank you.
Awesome. Fantastic. Yes, so he is admitted to the University of Oxford for reading physics, but he is continuing his undergrad at IIT. Okay, so let's move into the first segment of our discussion today, which is college essays. I am sure all the high school students and families attending have heard a lot about essays. College essays are a very, very crucial component of the application process. They are considered deal breakers, and this is quote unquote from the admission officers, the horse's mouth itself. The college essays, especially involved in the US, the Canadian and the Indian liberal arts, they are different compared to what our students are used to writing. They are introspective, reflective. And students do struggle initially with this component and definitely procrastinate a lot on. So let's hear from our panelists, how did they handle this component, and more so crafted essays in such a way that, they were the hook onto their application. So my first question for Karthik. Karthik, can you share with us how you articulated your academic curiosity through your essays?
Yeah, sure, Sheetal. So I think the first step, I think the most important step, was reflection. So I asked myself, basically what that meant was that which ideas and experiences made me genuinely excited about learning over not just, the last 4 years of high school, but as far back as primary school. And I struggled initially with this reflection process. It can be hard, but my Red Pen counselor gave me this brainstorming worksheet that helped me formulate prompts, which gave more structure and clarity to my reflections. And I think this is very important when going through this essay writing process, having that structure and clarity. And then I wrote down anecdotes of instances both inside and outside the classroom of times when I pursued an activity simply because, I found it interesting and meaningful to me. And I attempted to make these, cursory notes as detailed and dense with information as possible. So that when I began writing my essays, it was very easy to connect these experiences to either the field I wanted to study or to a part of my personality that I wanted to share. And I can give you an example. For instance, for my Common App essay, I connected my love for puzzles and crosswords to the activities that I pursued in high school, and how this eventually led me to wanting to study computer science. So I think the best takeaway, and I think the best way to demonstrate academic curiosity is by showing rather than telling in your essay, which means you can't, the tendency is to simply describe yourself as academically curious, but it's important to show that you are with proof and evidence. So yeah, I think the reflection process is the most important part of demonstrating curiosity in your essay, because enthusiasm for a subject is not something you can fake. So, yeah.
Absolutely, you highlight a really important point out here, Karthik, that you can't fake enthusiasm for a subject, and we always tell students that don't tell, show. So you connected your actual passion for wanting to study computer science or coding through what you had done in your profile so far, in your activity so far. So that is fantastic. Moving on to, Meher. Meher, you are a student genuinely interested in math and art, and you showcase this in a very interesting manner in your essays. Can you share a little bit on that?
Correct. So my essay mainly focused on the convergence of math and art. So I took several examples from architectural buildings, and I basically explained how every monument or building, no matter how complicated they looked, it can be broken down into very simple shapes and polygons. So yeah, that was basically what my essay revolved around. And then I included some of my extracurricular activities to strengthen the point that I've actually, made the effort to do my best to combine math and art, and which is not something people normally do, but it actually strengthens both of them. So yeah.
Yeah, fantastic. So you kind of, through your essay, showed your passion for numbers, and you correlated it that how you see that connection in other streams in life as diverse as art. And the way that was connected and, broken down. And in fact, the way your essay then tied into the other components of your application, that commonality. And we always tell families and students that there has to be a thread that ties all the various components. It has to come together like a piece of puzzle. And I think the passion that you showed for numbers and correlated that to art was a fantastic way of demonstrating another layer to your personality through the essay.
Thank you.
Super. My next question to Shaurya. So Shaurya's journey has been, for our audience to know, Shaurya's journey has been interesting. He graduated Woodstock International in 2019, and then he was serving in the Singapore Army. Correct, Shaurya? And you were actively serving for 2 years, and you approached the application process really, really late. I remember you coming to us, I think, October 2nd week, 3rd week, and we had
actually mid-December.
Oh, you came to us mid-December?
Yeah.
So we had barely 4 weeks, right? For your deadlines, correct. So can you share with us how you navigated or how you highlighted your gap year through your essays?
Yeah, so universities usually look for what you bring different to the table compared to everyone else. And since my gap years consisted mostly of my national service, my service in the army, my time in the army, I just try to portray all the lessons that I learned in the army that I couldn't learn otherwise outside, and what I brought different to the table for the university that I was applying to. So things like teamwork, leadership, determination are taught at like a different scale in the army, because your life very much depends on it. So it's like I try to portray that in my essays and show them that I was capable of leading a team, of getting anything done that was given to me. So while I didn't have like many labs or research experience, I did try to show them my interest in engineering that I wanted to do by showing them my interest in like the mechanics of rifles or military vehicles and aircraft. So in that way, I still tied my experience in the army to the field that I would like to be studying.
Brilliant. Because especially, the major that you were going for, and we always tell our families that engineering, male, Asian, it's one of the most lethal combinations. And the fact that over the gap year, the 2 years, you didn't have the opportunity to show depth in that engineering stream. But through your essays, you demonstrated something that was not captured in the other parts of the application, which was leadership, which was growing as an individual through life skills, and connecting even your army life to the mechanics, the interest in mechanical engineering. So that was fantastic. And again, for our students, the takeaway from this is that do demonstrate in your essays a part or a layer to you that is tying to the other parts of the components of the application, but something that's not repetitive, and something that tells them a little bit about who you are as an individual, right? So that's about essays. Moving on to our next component, interviews. Interviews are also a very crucial component of the application process. They are something that can be prepared and one can be ready for prior. But the interview process and the experience or the format varies, whether you're talking from a US interview process or an experience versus an Indian liberal arts versus a UK one. So, my first question on the same topic to Aryaman. Aryaman, the University of Oxford application is an intensely academic one. Can you share the online interview, experience, and how did you prepare for the entrance PAT exam? That's the physics aptitude test.
Before I begin, am I audible now?
Yes, you're absolutely fine.
Yeah. So, yeah, firstly, I'd like to thank the speakers who came before me for their wonderful insights. And to the prospective applicants, I'd just like to mention that the UK applications are very different from the US applications. They're very, very subject intensive, and they don't really care much about your extracurriculars or positions of responsibility or social work that you might have done. But I mean, you can mention it on your application. So the way this works is that you have to submit a single personal statement, which is approximately 700 words, and a letter of recommendation. After that, you have to appear for an entrance test. And if you clear that, then you have to face maybe 2 to 3 rounds of interviews by the subject professors of your intended major at the university itself. So talking about the physics aptitude test, I'd just like to mention here that my journey was a little different. Oxford was never in the scheme of things. I had always planned to go to IIT, but what happened last year was that due to the pandemic, the entrance exams got delayed by 4 months. And at that point of time, there was no clarity as to whether we'd get to appear for the IIT exams or not. So in fact, I applied to Oxford as a backup. But so the thing here is that I was intensively preparing for the IIT exam, which is, in my opinion, it's far tougher than the Oxford entrance test. So I didn't have any problem appearing for the PAT because I had already covered that material very intensively. But for people, I mean, for normal school kids, what I'd like to suggest is that they should take up some sort of additional subject related coaching for their Oxford entrance test, because it is slightly above your normal CDSC or IB curriculum. It's even slightly above the APs, which I mean, if you're familiar with that. So I'd like to recommend that. And if you're diligent and if you go through your course material, the test shouldn't be a problem. The real problem comes in the interviews, because they're with subject professors from Oxford. So they're like stalwarts in their field and they know much more than you do. So the thing here is to, and they're like anything you might have ever experienced before. You're forced to be creative. They're very unconventional, and they don't ask anything straight from the textbook. Like, for instance, I mean, my intended major was physics. So one of the questions I was asked in my interviews was that, imagine you're standing on the beach and you have an empty glass, and you fill that glass with ocean water. And in doing so, can you say that you have removed an entire layer of water molecules from the ocean? Now, such a question is unlike anything I had ever encountered before in my high school or even in my IT preparation. And furthermore, they did not even give any data. So at such points in time, you have to think outside the box. You have to try, and you don't have to necessarily arrive at the right answer, but you have to just demonstrate how you are thinking and why you are thinking that way. So, in my opinion, like, just to sum it up, your entrance test for Oxford or Cambridge would be, I mean, shouldn't be a big deal if you have like done some supplemental coaching. And for the interviews, I'd recommend that you try and read up more about the subject so that you can think outside the box and be more creative and authentic in the interview, because it's going to be very unconventional.
Super, Ariman. Thank you so much for that, comprehensive but still the concise to the point answer, where you've mentioned, you've highlighted the fact that there is no right and wrong in the interview. They are not concerned whether you are coming to a correct answer, but they want to know how are you getting there, what is the rationale, what is the logic, what is the whole bits and pieces you are using to get there. And sometimes
I'm sorry to interrupt, but in fact this was, so I faced 3 interviews, and this was the first thing I was told in all 3, that we are not looking for the right answer. We just want to see how you think and whether you have the aptitude to become a physicist.
Absolutely. And one thing that I'd just like to point to our audience also today, that it is the Oxford, the Oxford, Cambridge universities that ask you for interviews. UK, the other universities, colleges do not ask for interviews. But the Oxbridge interview process is a very, very cumbersome one, and something that, requires a lot of prep. And that's the reason, we wanted to highlight that. Okay, moving on. Thank you, Aryaman, so much for that. Moving on to Aditya. Aditya, you are a recipient of the Richmond Scholarship Award. For our audience today, this is a full scholarship inclusive of lodging, boarding, tuition at a prestigious liberal arts university in the US called the University of Richmond. Can you share with us the selection and the interview process and the experience for the same?
Yeah, sure. So basically the way the application process for the Richmond Scholars Award works is that everyone who applies before a certain deadline, I think it's December 1st.
Correct.
Everyone who applies before that deadline is automatically considered. And then out of that pool, around, I think 90 students are, out of that pool, from those who are admitted, around 90 are selected as finalists for the Scholars Program. So these finalists have to basically submit an additional essay and also attend an online interview with a panel consisting of various faculty members from the college. So when I applied, because I'd sent in a theater portfolio as well, I got selected as a finalist through an artistic route. So I had to also attend an additional artists interview, which was, with a panel consisting of arts faculty. And I also had to send in 2 self-taped monologues. So a few weeks after, submitting all the required documents and attending interviews, they sent an email saying that I'd been selected. So that's kind of what the process is like.
Awesome. So Aditya, you did mention to us that, there was a panel of around 6 or 4 to 6 faculty, and they questioned you on, your love for psychology, for theater, anything else that can help our future applicants?
Yeah, so in my case, for example, where the things I was planning to study were, on the surface level seem very diverse, like psychology and theater don't have a very obvious link.
Correct.
So for any students who are, interested in diverse fields, something that interviewers and college faculty in general really appreciate is if you can kind of give them a little insight into where you think you can combine those areas of interest. So I think that's something they really like, and it kind of shows your interest for both subject areas.
Fantastic. And another question along the same lines, Aditya, that, of course, bagging the prestigious award is a huge feat. Can you tell us what you feel helped your application stand out for, getting this award?
Yeah, so I think, like a few people mentioned earlier, essays was one of the big things that really helped me stand out. And I think TRP helped me a lot there. So when it came to, brainstorming on topics that I should talk about, which of my extracurricular activities are really important to highlight. So I think Karthik mentioned earlier, right, that that when you're talking about your extracurricular activities, they really want to see your passion for what you're planning to major in. So I think essays is probably one of the main things.
I would like to add to that. I think, Aditya, your application was a real good example of a balanced application. And when you talk about, winning such a prestigious scholarship, the university or, the admission officers, when, that entire holistic evaluation, the different components of your application, the academic profile and the non-academic profile were very well balanced. You had, your academic trajectory was steady and always showing that upward trajectory. You had completed your ACT and had achieved a good score of 35 way early on, and then you consistently showed your depth for theater and psychology over the entire 2 years. And your application, where we talk about your academics, your extracurriculars, resume, essays, they all came in together, tied in together very, very well in a very balanced way. And I think that balanced application was, according to us, quite instrumental in helping you, achieve this award. So again, congratulations to you on that. Okay, moving on to our next segment, extracurriculars. For the families, I'm sure right now all our panelists have spoken a lot about, the importance of extracurriculars, because now it's not only something that shows the growth in you, it's something that shows the passion in your essays, in your resume, and extracurriculars do help, distinguish you from your other peers. They do form the bulk of the application also. And one thing that we always tell our families and students is that during high school, it's time to show depth over breadth. It's not important to do 20 random things. Do 2 things, do 3 things, but show the depth in them. So I just want families to know that there is no formula out here. You don't have to do a community service. You don't have to do a research project. You don't have to be a head boy, head girl. There are various ways of showing that leadership. There are various ways in showing that intellectual curiosity. Identify and plan ahead of time, and starting and thinking of this early on, 9th onwards, I think that's going to be really, really helpful. So along the same lines, my question to Sana. Sana, you've consistently worked on your extracurriculars, through high school, specifically multiple research projects. Can you share your experience and tell us how this helped you decide that you wanted to study IR? That's international.
Yeah, of course. So I think early on, I found topics that I'm heavily interested in under the umbrella major of international relations, political science. And so through a summer program, I connected with the professor and wrote a research paper on why democracy is not the ideal regime type. And I enjoyed this because it's very niche outside the classroom. We have our basic history, English at school, but specifically regime types, we don't really study that much of that in high school. And so I followed up with my professor over the last 3 years. And after the summer program was over, he invited me to Rice University. He's a professor from Rice, to work with him at the university. And I think because of this research experience, I applied to a really niche program at Georgetown. It's the School of Foreign Service. So I think that gave me the confidence to say okay, even though I'm 18, I think I know that I want to do this right now. And I think overall, the things that really helped me is that I love asking questions. And I think I grew personally because I realized that complex questions usually have really complex answers. And I think that helped a lot with the essay process as well, because you realize that, not everything has a very straight answer. And I learned how to analyze sources and speak as an impartial interviewee. And I think, yeah, one just piece of advice is if you are going to talk to a professor, reach out with a really solid purpose and question related to a passion of yours or a research study you're conducting. Don't just aimlessly email them just to say on your application, like, hey, I spoke to a professor, and you write their name down, because name dropping it's not really effective. So yeah.
That's fantastic. So just to kind of know a little bit more, Sana, out there, that you were initially, doing this research with another organization, and after you completed that research, you then reached out to the same professor independently and wanted to take it forward, correct?
Yeah, that's correct. After I finished my summer program, I stayed in touch with the professor, and then I emailed him. I didn't think he would respond, and then he did. And he was like, wait, why don't you just come, like in 2019, he was like, why don't you just come to Houston and work? And I was like, okay. And yeah, it was pretty
brilliant.
Chill out.
And that also took you forward. And I remember you mentioning that you had done a whole research then on, human trafficking, right?
Yeah, I did a documentary on the red light district community in Kamathipura, just like in Bombay. Yeah.
Yes, super. So just the highlight and the takeaway out here is that Sana consistently, invested her energy only in research and along that one stream. And as I just mentioned earlier, it's not important to do 20 random things. A lot of leadership, intellectual curiosity, empathy, community service can be all connected to this one activity. Along the same line, Sana, just moving slightly away from the topic of extracurriculars, I just wanted to ask you that in spite of having a strong profile, academically, you were really, really going well. You had fantastic research going on. You were still really concerned about, submitting that application without test scores. You had genuine reasons why you couldn't sit the SAT or the ACT. How did you articulate this in your application?
Yeah, okay, so this is such a important question to me. The amount of times I called the Red Pen and Sanjana specifically, just like venting and really stressed out, because we keep getting like emails and reminders like, oh, it's not updated. Would you like to put in your SAT or ACT score? And I really thought I would be rejected from everywhere because I didn't have a score. But I think the Red Pen played a really supportive role in this specific process, because it wasn't so much hands-on strategic work. Like, you can't really do anything about the fact that you couldn't give a test. They just listened to me complain. In the Common App, there is a question about additional information regarding COVID-19 and the impact on us. So, I mean, coming from a good background, we have to be careful not to like overload there, because honestly speaking, I was not impacted by COVID in a severe way, but I still do have to explain why I couldn't go. And I just wrote about my family's agreement with grandparents in the house that like last July was just not the time to explore where to take a test. And they held one in Borivali. I wrote that it was a containment zone, and I really briefly, but very, very explicitly explained what happened. But then Georgetown, I think that's the screenshot that you're showing. Should I go ahead and explain? Or
yeah, you can, Sana. I'll just give the audience a brief to this, that universities last cycle did go test optional. Similarly, this cycle, many of them are going test optional. In fact, the UCs are going test blind. And in spite of going test optional, Sana had even articulated and mentioned vividly the reasons that she couldn't sit the test. But the university did come back to her, emailing her specifically if she could give slightly more detail on why she couldn't, sit the SAT. So just for the families to know that your application is evaluated with reference or in context to the applying pool. So Sana's application was evaluated first in context to the other ASB students and Mumbai students. So they may want to know that, if others probably had taken it, if Sana could give slightly more of a detailed response to that. And they did come back asking her for the same. So yeah, Sana, anything more that you'd like to add to that?
No, I mean, I think you covered all of it. I just had to submit another form explaining for the second time, like why with detail it didn't work out. And at this point, I was like, yeah, there's no way I'm getting in, because they're asking a lot for an SAT or SAT score.
Okay, yeah, super. So what would your advice be, Sana, to future applicants with regards to testing?
I think first, like, really do research on your school's testing policies, like the history of them as well. Like, how much do they really care? Because they do post a lot about it. If you're really stressed out, email your AO and just tell them. So when they read it, they remember that you've already reached out and you've been pretty proactive about it. And I think the last thing is don't sit back and not take the test. If you do have the opportunity, do take it. It's good to have that data point. It is another very strong data point. But if it's out of your control, like it'll all work out. So yeah.
Super. And that's exactly, what we kind of tell our students, that giving them that SAT and ACT score, if, the environment permits and if you are comfortable, helps them, validate and, tie in your academic profile, understanding one more data point when comparing you to, various other international students. Okay. Thank you so much, Sana, for even sharing this snapshot with us that we could share with our audience. Going back to extracurriculars, my question to you, Meher, you had accomplished, multiple math Olympiads. You were a part of the NASA club. You all were going to be representing, I think, at the national or international level. All of this came to a standstill with the pandemic. How did you still continue exploring your academic interest through the pandemic?
Correct. So my school didn't really offer any extracurricular activities during the pandemic because everything just was more focused on the transition to online classes and just focusing on 12th grade. Correct. But then when things got a little slower, I took to Coursera to do 2 courses, one in game theory and one in calculus. So calculus was basically just math, so that I could just write in my application. But game theory was economics, but also the use of probability. So that just strengthened my application that math can be used in several fields, and you don't need to study only math to apply it in just like the math field. You can do it anywhere. So yeah, that's what I did
you also
on the academic side.
Correct. Sorry, I was just jumping in that you also held an online art exhibition or a fair, right?
I wanted to, but that didn't really work out. So I just took to social media to just share everything. Right. Yeah, but there were a lot of online art competitions which I participated in. Right. So yeah, and then I did an internship with HT Media. So I was a digital analyst, which mainly consisted of me collecting data and a lot of surveying processes. But then I got to analyze them, which was another really good way to showcase how math can be used in real life. So it wasn't a math internship, but I still used it there. So I just kind of...
And I think this internship you had mentioned to us, is this internship also taught you or was your window into understanding data science, right?
Correct, yeah.
And that how math is the foundation for one of the upcoming and sought after fields. Data is driving the world today. And this gave you a good glimpse into, math taking you forward with data science.
Correct. So I'm going to take a few courses that I didn't think I'd take at Dartmouth, but yeah, I'm just going to explore a little more and try and fit math and everything, basically.
Super. So you very, seamlessly transitioned to the online format with whatever was available and continued exploring your academic interests.
Correct.
Super. My next question thank you, Meher. Thank you so much for that. My next question to Danish. Danish, you are a recipient of the full scholarship at NYU Abu Dhabi. For our audience here, that NYU Abu Dhabi is a highly selective university with an admit rate as low as 4%. And as an international student, Danish is awarded the full scholarship. So Danish, my question to you, that one has to definitely have a very robust profile academically as well as non-academically to be successful in achieving this scholarship. How did you continue developing your profile through the pandemic?
Thank you. Before I say what I did exactly during the pandemic, I'd like to mention that I come from a really small town called Nanded, and I was also preparing for the JEE during the applications process. So I didn't have a lot of opportunities or time pre-pandemic to develop extracurricular activities. So I feel like because of the pandemic, as everything moved online, that gave me it sort of leveled the playing field for me, because I could participate in things that people in Mumbai or Delhi were participating in. So as to what I did exactly during the pandemic, I took part in MUNs and debating events, both international and national, and I even helped organize some MUNs. I took part in online community service, where I worked with this company called Aftertaste, who provide vocational training to women with low-income backgrounds, and I help them know more about consumer awareness and digital literacy. Since that's really important during the pandemic. Digital literacy basically means knowing how to operate phones and computers and being able to transfer money cashlessly. Apart from that, I also took courses online to demonstrate my interest in physics because that's what I'll be majoring in. I took courses in astrophysics and planetary physics on edX and Coursera. And I also took courses in introductory Python and Python for research in STEM fields, basically.
Lovely.
And yeah. And apart from that, I also took part in programming challenges since I'm also interested in computer science. I think I might minor in computer science.
Okay.
So to demonstrate that, I took part in national and international programming challenges, which were also sort of student held. So yeah, that's that.
Super. So you again, just similar to, what even Meher shared with us, you did maximize all the opportunities that were available to you online and continued along the same lines that, you could. And another important note that I'd like to share with our families out here that Danish highlighted a really good point that he is from a small town. So just for, all of you all to know that when applications are evaluated, as I mentioned earlier, you are evaluated with reference to the pool that you're applying from. So a student from Namdev may not be directly compared to a student from Mumbai or any other city. But in Danish's case, also the fact that he was from a small town and he leveraged everything that he could to continue showing that depth definitely played an instrumental role. Thank you, Danish, for sharing that.
Thank you.
Thank you. Moving on to our next segment, and one of the last segments as such is the takeaways. We are going to have our panelists share what were the biggest takeaways from this process, having navigated it just recently, and what would their piece of advice to future applicants would be. So my first question to Ananya. Ananya, you were completely new to this application process and you started a little late in the cycle. Can you highlight what was the biggest takeaway for you?
I actually had 3 biggest takeaways from this.
Awesome, go for it.
So the first one was start early. Because I started late, I had to stick to rigid deadlines, and they often coincided with my IB workload and deadlines, which resulted in a very little margin of flexibility. So if you start early, then you can avoid these sort of problems and you can sail through the process much more smoothly. Second one was research well. Crafting your essays around the common spots for what you are interested in and what the university offers is what they are looking for. And hence having, experts that help you with researching and finding those features can really help improve the outcome. Then the third one is get a third perspective, but not too many. Getting the opinion of an external party can really help improve the quality of not just the language, but also the quality of research, like I just mentioned. However, on a side note, too many cooks spoil the broth, and therefore having too many family members and friends giving you inputs might get very confusing. Instead of that, having an expert who's going through your essays and giving you valuable feedback might be the most efficient way to complete the process.
Super. Thank you so much, Ananya. And I think you touched on all the points were super, exactly important the way we say. And we always say that, starting this application process early is the secret to submitting a strong application. Yes, you mentioned that, do not have too many people giving you their inputs on essays. Essays are a very subjective sort of component. They have to tie into the other components, start to finish in a way on your application. And taking that essay around and taking multiple, views is just going to ultimately, communicate a very hodgepodge and a mishmash sort of a version. Stick to one family member and probably one external person or an expert in the field who is going to be helping you start to finish. That will have definitely a sharper and a more genuine narrative. So thank you, Ananya, for highlighting all of that. My next question to Meher, can you share how you navigated the college research process? I remember when you approached and started the process with us, you were pretty locked on to, pretty firm on applying to the UK and specifically the Oxbridge.
Yeah.
And then as the process started and you kind of steered towards Dartmouth, and then Dartmouth was your ED. And for
Correct,
families, just to know that ED is early decision. It's a binding application. which means that if you are admitted, you have to enroll there and you have to retract your applications from all other universities globally. So Meher, can you just share the college research process with us?
So I didn't really look at US as my first option, but I think a little towards the end, when I had my ACT scores and I had like all the scores required for the US application, I think I thought it was a better fit because of the entire liberal arts curriculum and how I can take certain unconventional subjects and major and minor in something that's not necessarily related. Because the UK offered maths and economics, which was the only combination I could find in the universities I was planning on applying to. So, which was nice, I didn't mind that. But when I looked at the US subject choices and how I can, customize my entire curriculum, I just thought that it might be better to just switch right now. So yeah, that happened. And then I had a list of whole aspirational colleges and, the backup colleges and the backup.
Right.
Yeah. So I just had tons of lists, but I had no clear idea where to apply. So in the end, I narrowed it down to Dartmouth College and Carnegie Mellon. But Dartmouth stood out to me because of the D plan, which allows me to take a quarter off for internship or research purposes, which makes it slightly easier to get these opportunities because most people just take the summer off to do the internships and it just gets really crowded. So I can just take any quarter off to, work on that. And additionally, Dartmouth was with a school full of traditions and cultures, and it was just really old, and the sports facilities there. So I was really interested in water sports. So on a more academic note, that is what I'll be doing.
Awesome.
But yeah.
So I think researching colleges well in time, and I guess while that entire process started, you explore and you realize that where in the UK, it's a more rigid and you have to commit to a major. The US offered you the flexibility of liberal arts and the flexibility of indulging in diverse passions where, with regards to yours was math and art. And that's how you steered towards the UK. Towards the US.
Yeah, correct.
Awesome.
And I just like to say that reaching out to people who were already enrolled. So like I reached out to a few people from the class of 2024, and those people just gave me certain things that you can't find on the Dartmouth website if you're doing your research for colleges. So I just suggest that, you reach out to the seniors, and it adds a more personal note to your application because it shows them that you've done your research and you've actually made the effort to connect with people already.
Yeah, that's demonstrated interest. And we always tell our families that demonstrated interest is important for a couple of universities. I'm just going to jump in 1 second just to let the audience know that we are, if anybody has any questions, do keep typing them in the Q&A box. And after this segment, we will be, opening up the floor to Q&A where we'll be answering all your questions as well. Okay, going back to Karthik. Karthik, my question to you is that how did you research colleges? CS being one of the most brutal majors, and you bagged impressive admits from UCLA to UIUC and Georgia Tech. So how did you, what were the resources that you used for researching the colleges for yourself?
Yeah, thanks, Sheetal. So I think I'll answer that in two ways, as in the first part being, how I researched colleges, and the second part being why I ended up picking Georgia Tech. Yeah. So to answer the first part of your question, together, my Red Pen counselor and I made a template that consisted of all the different factors that I felt mattered to me most in a college. And to give you some examples, we broke it down into objective details like location, cost, size. I personally, being, having grown up in the US, I was kind of set on not wanting to go to a school either, near where I'd grown up. I wanted to explore other places, and I also didn't want to go to the Midwest, so it was kind of on either coast. And then other factors like whether a college was public or private, or if it was, a religious college, etc. And the template also included details about the different programs, like their academic reputation, what their curriculums were like. And then I used this to make essentially what was, called a long list which was, more like 20 plus colleges, more than I would have applied to. And then I spoke to students on online forums and I attended webinars to learn more about these colleges that were on my long list. And my counselor and I used this information to decide a final shortlist. Again, like how some of the other panelists have already stated, keeping in mind how competitive the colleges I was applying to were, so that, you had a good balance of reach, target, and safety. I still feel like we perhaps were a little top heavy and we applied to a lot of competitive schools, but all you need is one if you get in. So
yeah, and with you, it just got better and better, right, Karthik?
Yeah, it started off kind of rocky because I applied Columbia ED and that was a bloodbath. And it did not get better initially, but after that it was just uphill from there. So yeah, I was personally interested in finding colleges where I could get a traditional computer science program, a rigorous engineering program, but also have the opportunity to get a second degree in philosophy because I was really interested in the humanities. And it was details like this that I fleshed out with my counselor. And this is what helped me narrow down the list of colleges I wanted to apply to, since only some offered the niche opportunities that I was looking for. And I think this is where it really helps to have an independent counselor, because my school counselor, the British school, and my Red Pen counselor had really different roles to play. I know a lot of families and students, I personally was kind of nervous about how you'd go about balancing two relationships because as I think a previous panelist said, too many cooks spoil the broth. But they had really different roles to play. My school counselor was helping me organize things like transcripts and recommendation letters, and my independent counselors helped me with other things like college research, my essays. So yeah, it's a very symbiotic relationship.
Fantastic.
Yeah, so in the end, when I was deciding between a lot of appealing admissions.
Yeah, what helped you zero down to GTech?
Yeah, I got to be honest, it can almost feel like a curse when everything kind of works out and you've got all these choices. And I personally thought that I would regret any decision that I made because I'd be missing out on what another school had to offer. And especially with LA, because all the allure of the West Coast and what people say in the media, it's a very attractive place. It was hard to say no to because of the proximity to Silicon Valley. But I think the first thing that it's important to understand, though, is that there is no wrong choice, when deciding which college to commit to. As long as you're fully committed, you're not going to have any regrets. And I think I gave up on trying to figure out which program was objectively better, since at some point the distinctions between the academics of these schools is relevant. They're all really good. So I focused on other factors. One of the reasons I chose tech over LA and UIUC was the cost. Even though the others were also publics, the total cost of Georgia Tech was much lower. And the mean salary after graduation was, the same, if not higher. So the value on that investment was really good. And tech was also the smallest of the three colleges. And I felt that I wanted a more personal and intimate undergrad experience, even if I was going to a public university. But I think the final and most important reason that I picked tech was the environment and the ethos. As a technical university, which specializes in engineering, everyone on campus is super deeply involved with innovations. They're constantly surrounded by technology and science. And since it's in a southern state, Georgia is second most southern in the US. There's also like this deep tradition of community service and community building. And this resonated with my desire to work at the intersection of technology and public services. Fantastic. So I think these are the sort of factors that help.
Karthik, I love the way that you've broken down, the actual, final data points that, got you locked into GTech, whether it was having a smaller community at a larger public school, the cost of investment versus, the mean salary. So that's such a fantastic way of, taking that final call. And you highlighted something that was really useful out here. And, families very often have that concern, especially families who've not navigated this process earlier, that how does the independent counselor work parallelly with a school counselor? And we always tell families that it's a symbiotic relationship. Both of them, the roles are very, very different. The school counselor's role is to help you ensure that, you've got that list of colleges ready where they have to send the counselor letter, the 2 subject letters of recommendation, and the transcripts. And the independent consultant helps you identify the right fit, fine-tune your essays, interview preparation, why, what program, and so on and so forth, along with, scholarship applications and all of that. And ultimately, both the counselors are vested in your best interest and they will work parallelly. So thank you for Karthik, sharing that with us, because of course, at the British school, the school has a fantastic strong counseling system, and you worked with an independent counselor, and it was a smooth ride. Correct? Super. My next question, Sana, to you. You started the process pretty early on. I remember you approaching us at the onset of grade 10, and we started ideating around, the larger picture. So how did starting early really help you, Sana?
To be really honest, I think it just made everything much more light and fun. I started thinking and brainstorming, grade 10, which helped me build, I think, a stronger resume. I have to say the essay writing process was one of my favorites and the most draining, but it was my favorite. And with starting earlier, I had a lot more time to finish the boring stuff, like the activities list and the resume editing. And I could focus on the writing and brainstorming later in the summer and the fall of my senior year, which is when, everything is going crazy in the IB anyway. You don't really want to be making lists. I think it just meant getting all my questions answered by the admissions officers earlier when they're not as busy with application questions in like the spring versus the summer, fall, and winter. And it also helped me have several drafts of my essays. And I had that flexibility to add schools to my list, even if it was a month before some of the apps. But yeah, it went well.
Super. Thank you so much. My next question to Danish. Danish, receiving the full, scholarship, the full aid was very important to you. So how did this impact your university research?
Thank you. As you just said, receiving a full or at least substantial scholarship was really important to me, because without that, it would not have been possible for me to attend. Correct. So the entire college selection process revolved around this one main point. And the other factor was the university or college should have a good physics program or department. So I talked with my counselor and I checked online resources, and we curated a list of colleges which would fit these two criteria. And we also looked at colleges which had low tuition fee, and the total cost of attendance was lower as compared to other colleges, and which also had opportunities for me to find work, so I could sort of make money and help pay towards the tuition fee. And in the scholarship process, since a lot of the scholarships also require you to write down additional essays or have interviews, since we curated the list looking at whether the colleges have scholarships or not, this really helped the essay and interview part, since I had much more time to prepare good essays and prepare for the interviews. I prepared for the interviews by having mock interviews with my counselor, in which I sort of refined my body language and confidence and like stuff I was talking about. And I finally settled on NYU Abu Dhabi because it fulfilled the scholarship and the physics department program completely. Plus, it also gave me a lot of travel opportunities. NYU Abu Dhabi is famous for allowing students to travel abroad. I can do classes in Shanghai and in New York and in various portal campuses in Europe. Plus, there's a lot of diversity there. So that also has a really good physics program.
Fantastic. And a couple of our consultants have visited, the campus, and it's a beautiful campus. And, the international diversity is one of the largest. So we are so thrilled, that this fell through for you, Danish. You definitely deserve it. Moving on to, Shaurya. Shaurya, my question to you is that why did you decide to matriculate at UBC when you had other stellar admits, US admits for engineering? And can you share with us that, you were serving in the army while the application process, kickstarted? How did you balance all of this? So my question is in two parts. Firstly, why Canada over the US admits? And secondly, how did you manage balancing it all?
Yeah, so for the first question, why Canada over US, it was definitely a very difficult choice to make. But there were a few big reasons that pushed me to UBC. The most important one was like the financial weight that going to a college in Canada would bring compared to the US. Because, I'd be saving tens of thousands of dollars going to UBC compared to another US college that I got admitted to. So, that was a big thing that convinced me to go to UBC. But other than that, another big reason was because of the political and racial climate in the USA right now, I feel personally that the USA is currently quite unstable, and there's a lot of civil conflicts inside the country, and the government is not one that's really respected by the people. There's expensive healthcare, people go into debt, there's debt from student loans, and most people that go to the US to study have a tough time making their payments to the university that they're going to. So that proved to be a very influential point for me to go to Canada. And thirdly is because of the location. I grew up in Nepal and I moved to Singapore. So going to Vancouver, which is a city surrounded by mountains, would be like the perfect place for me, because Nepal would be the mountainous region and Singapore is a city. So it was like a mix of the two. So I felt very comfortable studying in a place that is similar to the ones that I've lived in before. Lovely. And to answer your second question, how I balanced everything while I was working in the army, I honestly don't know myself how I did it, but because I procrastinate a lot myself, and going to the Red Pen in mid-December was a very, very bad decision. I should have actually done it much earlier. But when I went to the Red Pen in mid-December, I didn't really think that I'd be able to actually get into a good university. But I thought, I have nothing to lose here. I might as well try. So I was working 18 to 20 hour days, 5 days a week, and I'd only get home on Friday night and have until Sunday night to rest. So I had little to no time to myself. And the second I'd get home from the army, I'd start on my applications, or the second I'd actually finish training, I'd bring my laptop into camp, which I was not allowed to do, but I did it anyways. I brought it into camp, and I finished training, would finish around 12 a.m. and then I'd go to my bunk. I wouldn't even shower. I'd finish my essays that I had to write for my counselors, and then I'd go to shower and sleep around 2, 3, and then wake up the next morning at 5. So it was a very unhealthy process for me that I wouldn't recommend anyone to do, because it is really difficult. But as always, things turned out well in the end. But so to anyone that's working right now, or will work, or is studying and managing IB or school or whatever it is, I highly, highly recommend to start your applications as soon as you can, even if it's like a bit by bit, because that helps a lot. And you don't want to end up like me, writing essays, like 3-4 essays day in, day out. And then, the quality of those essays could be really reduced if you do them all at once instead of little by little.
But luckily, Shaurya, your experiences were so exciting. And I remember there was a whole team behind, your applications. We were a whole team. Yeah. A whole team of around 4 to 5 consultants, because we had very little time. We had to have you give us the drafts. But your content and, your journey and your experience was so exciting that I think you finally had fantastic content to, fine tune for us.
Yeah. Thank you so much for that.
Yeah, so thank you, Shaurya, for that. My next question to Aryaman. Aryaman, can you share one piece of advice to future Oxbridge applicants? And how would you suggest they prepare for the academic or the subject content for Oxbridge?
Right. Thank you, Sheetal. So there's more than one piece of advice that I'd like to share with the attendees. So firstly, as I mentioned before, that the application to Oxford or Cambridge, for that instance, is intensely academic. And it centers around your passion for the subject, your competency in that subject, your ability to communicate to their professors about your interest and your thought process related to that subject. So my advice would be to start as early as possible, because there's a caveat here that you go in with a fixed major. You cannot change your major once you go to the UK, unlike the US. So you have to be very sure of what you want to do. So I would recommend exploring your areas of interest, reading up more about them, talking to your school teachers, undertaking a research project, if that helps, to help you firm and narrow down your interests to a particular subject, because once you enroll, then there's no going back. You can't double major, you can't do a minor. There are almost no electives, and it's a very fixed and rigid curriculum, which is beautiful in itself, but that's only if you have your interest and passion for that subject sustains. Now, once you're sure of what you want to pursue, I would recommend preparing for the admissions tests and the interviews, because they're the real deal. You also have to write a personal statement explaining your motivation and your achievements and your competencies in that subject. But I mean, that's not a big deal. That can be handled well. But one important thing in the personal statement as well is to link everything back to your subject. I mean, for instance, they encourage you to write extracurriculars, but I mean, it should be directly or, somewhat related to your area of interest. I mean, you just can't, because it's a single statement, you just can't, harp about physics for the major portion and in the end mention that, I was the head boy, or I played piano, or I did this sport. For instance, I mean, I'm a black belt in Taekwondo, and I correlated that in my personal statement by mentioning how using the principles of rotational dynamics, I was able to, make my kicks faster or stronger and higher. And I'm also learning the guitar, so I mentioned how I was inspired by the clarity and the beauty of music, and how I aspired to emulate those qualities in my scientific work as well. So that's the thing about the personal statement. For the entrance test, as I mentioned, a certain bit of additional coaching would be helpful. I believe the Red Pen has tie-ups with certain agencies that provide coaching for the UK entrance test, and I would definitely recommend that. And for the interviews, again, it's that's a completely different ball game. I would suggest you do a certain amount of additional reading on certain extra topics beyond your school curriculum, so you can talk about them. For instance, in one of my interviews, I spoke about quantum tunneling, which was, in fact, I was asked a question about what my favorite topic was in the realm of quantum physics. And as 11th and 12th students, we don't really go deep into something like quantum physics. We study it at a very cursory level. So for that question, having a little bit of background, I mean, obviously they don't expect a lot from you, you're just in grade 12, but having a little bit of background in what quantum tunneling was and how it impacted radioactivity and its practical applications, so that helped me at that point in time. So and obviously, you have to be creative, authentic, and try to think outside the box, try to correlate everything, and I mean, try to present it with a very rational and scientific viewpoint. Even if you don't know anything about what's being asked, try to like tackle the problem very systematically, and I think that should be good.
Super. Thank you, Aryaman. And you very rightly highlighted that the Oxbridge process is a very academic one, as I mentioned earlier. The personal statement, or in fact, it's not like the personal statement in the UK is an academic personal statement where they want to know what you want to study, why you want to study. And you also, again, mentioned how you kind of connected your passion, whether it was Taekwondo or playing an instrument, to your academic interests. So thank you for sharing all of that. And my last question before we open up the floor to Q&A is to Sana. Sana, you are admitted to a string of fantastically selective universities like Johns Hopkins University, Rice, Swarthmore, UMich, Tufts, and Georgetown. Can you please help us, what helped you decide finally, or how did you zero down on Georgetown?
Yeah, thank you so much, Sheetal. So Georgetown has always been one of my dream schools. And honestly, in the last 3 years, as I focused on politics, economics, diplomacy, activism, it became one of my favorite. Small things like the dual degree between the School of Foreign Service and the business school make it like even more attractive to me. And I think this is where the deep dive research about your schools when making your list is super important. I think Karthik mentioned this earlier. I really thought I would regret letting go of other schools. And yeah, I really thought that. But overall, I think what sets Georgetown apart from most of the other fantastic schools is the location, which is DC, the notable alumni, and honestly, the School of Foreign Service catering to exactly what I want to study and what I want out of my college experience. It has a strong core curriculum and a focus on my major and a happy environment and campus. And I think that's what made my decision.
Yeah, I'm sure. And the new program that Georgetown has introduced, which is a dual major between the McDowell and the Fletcher School of IR, is a highly selective one, and I'm sure you'll love it. Okay, so that brings us to the end of all the panelist questions and the answers. I'd like to now open up the floor to the Q&A. So let me just give me 1 second. Okay. The first question that we have, and we'll have the Q&A section for the next 10 to 15 minutes. The first question that I have is that how early is it to start these applications? Okay, so we always tell families that start thinking about this process as early as grade 9. Grades 9, 10, 11, and 12, these are the high school years, and that's what goes onto your application form. Before the 9th grade, it's all about exploring. 9th onwards, have a, like a bigger picture in place and start showing depth. Grade 10 onwards, start showing, start thinking about what you're planning to do in the summers, your SAT or any other external academic exams that you want to take. How do you want to show depth in your profile? Once grade 11 starts, it's time to dive into college research and start getting pen to paper. And we generally advise families that, by the time you are in the first term of grade 12, you should be 70% done with your application work so that you can focus on your school academics. So yes, the answer to this question is starting early as grade 9, if you can. The next question that we have is, what are the differences in the experience in a private university versus a public? And why was that a factor for consideration? Okay, is that directed towards any particular panelist? Okay, I'm happy to answer that. So the difference between a private and a public university is that a public university, firstly, the student body at a public university is really huge, anywhere upwards of 25 or 30,000, students. Class sizes are much larger. So your student teacher mentor relationship may not be as tight or intimate as in a private one. Resources are also shared with graduate students. Courses are of course available, but sometimes, if you are not, you have to apply for it ASAP, and if not, you have to wait for a semester. So those are the sort of the caveats with, a private university, a public university. When it comes to private university, the student body is slightly smaller, anywhere, between 5,000 to probably 15,000. The class sizes being smaller, teacher-student relationship, the mentor intimacy is quite tighter. Sometimes there are universities which are not sharing resources with graduate students, and so on and so forth. So yes, understanding the difference between a public and a private is very important when you start that college research process for yourself. The next question that I have is, since in the US subjects aren't as important on the application process as the UK, should US application essays that are focused on extracurriculars also connect to what you want to major in? Subject selection is important in the US. We always tell our families that more than the curricula, it's the subject selection. So it's not that US is not looking at the subjects, they are looking at the subjects. And yes, I think what the attendee is trying to ask is that should the essay be academic? No, not necessarily. The essays, when it comes to the US application process, are more reflective, introspective. Try to highlight what is not probably captured in the other parts of your application. There are, 7 prompts that are offered. In fact, this cycle they've offered a new prompt which is on gratitude also. So identify where you can show some growth as an individual, and if it's tying into your academic interest, great, but it does not have to be an academic one. And I hope that answers your question. Moving on to what sorts of extracurriculars should one pursue for specific majors such as psychology, management? So for even psychology and management, there are questions with regard, there are extracurriculars such as, you can shadow probably, some psychologists or doctors or, healthcare takers. You can delve a little deeper into understanding, into exploring biology, because bio is closely related to psychology. There are online courses on introduction to psychology. So that's something that you can take. Psychology is related to many, many streams. So there is criminal psychology, behavioral psychology. You can try to explore 1 or 2 specific niche psychology streams if you would want to. For management, again, it comes down to, if you're talking about business management, there are various ways of understanding management courses, again, whether online or there are institutions that offer what is known like, junior Shark Tank, where you can pitch a product and they can scale it up. So we at the Red Pen do help identify various courses, whether online, offline, aligned to your interests, that can show depth, or that can at least show that breadth that you wanted to explore something before you dived into the college experience. Okay, someone's asking what all extracurriculars can I do in order to pursue a business course? Okay, so business is a very wide umbrella term. Business encompasses many things, whether you're talking about business analytics, finance, management, social media marketing. So to understand business, you can explore a couple of these niche sort of topics, and then you can demonstrate that which segment interested you and now why you want to study business. As I just mentioned earlier, there are institutions that like Clever Harvey, and there are a couple of more that offer you like a project. You can create a Shark Tank sort of a project, and then you can scale up that idea. So that's something that you can do. So I hope that answers your question. My next question is, are community colleges good in the US? Okay, that's a great question. Yes, community colleges are great in the US. It's a route very well, worth exploring, where you do enroll in a community college for 2 years, and then after 2 years, you transition into the mainstream college, and you earn your associate degree from the community college, and it's a massively financial, savior. So yes, community colleges are good, so do explore it. But the only thing to know about community colleges are that they probably do not have like the dorm setup, which the private and the public colleges have. You have to have your own living arrangements. You have to be more of an individual to drive the process in a community college, where you design your majors. You have to take that onus of sitting with your academic advisor. You will be in a class with students of different age groups, so on and so forth. But having said all of that, the community colleges in the US are really, really good. So that brings us to the end of the Q&A. Yes, and that brings us to the end of our time also. So thank you, everybody. Firstly, a big thank you to our panelists. As I've said, previously also, thank you for trusting us in this journey with you. Thank you for sharing all this knowledge with us. And for our audience, just, the last piece of advice is that there is no formula when it comes to preparing for college applications. It's a long drawn process. Over the last 10 years, when we worked with over 6,500 students, achieved over 2,000 admits to selected universities, we've always seen that there is no formula out here. It's all about identifying what you're genuinely passionate about and showing that depth and starting in time. So if you have any questions with regards to educational planning, college applications, feel free to reach out to us at theredpen.in, or feel free to email me at sheetal.vora@theredpen.in, and we will help you. Thank you so much, and have a lovely weekend, and all the best to all the panelists for this next new exciting chapter in life. Thank you all.